The city had 1 million people. The roads connected every corner of the known world. The army had never lost a war it truly needed to win. And then, in the space of a single century, it was gone. Not conquered, not destroyed by a single enemy, not swept away by a natural disaster. Rome, the greatest political construction in human history, simply stopped working. And the question that has haunted historians for 2,000 years is the same question that matters today. How does something that powerful fall apart? The answer is not what you expect. It never is with Rome. To understand the collapse, you have to understand what Rome actually was at its height. Not just an empire, a system, a machine for converting conquest into stability and stability into more conquest. At its peak, the Roman Empire stretched from Scotland to Mesopotamia, from the Rhine to the Sahara. 60 million people lived under a single legal system. Trade flowed across 3 continents. The Mediterranean was, for the first and only time in history, a Roman lake. This was not an accident. It was the result of centuries of brutal, intelligent adaptation. Rome lost battles. Rome lost wars. Rome lost entire armies. And every time, it came back stronger, having learned something its enemies had not. So what went wrong? The first crack appeared not in the army, not on the frontier, but in the treasury. Rome's economy ran on silver. The denarius, the standard Roman coin, was the lifeblood of the empire. It paid the soldiers. It funded the roads. It kept the bureaucracy moving. And for generations, it held its value because it was genuinely made of silver, almost 95% pure. Then the conquests slowed. The easy wealth, the gold of Carthage, the treasures of Egypt, the silver mines of Spain, had already been taken. The empire was now defending what it had rather than taking what it wanted. And defense is expensive, far more expensive than conquest. Emperors facing budget shortfalls made a decision that seemed small at the time. They reduced the silver content in the coins, just a little. Just enough to make more coins from the same amount of metal. Nobody would notice, but people noticed. Merchants adjusted their prices. Soldiers demanded more coins for the same value. The cost of everything rose, and each emperor who inherited the problem made it slightly worse. Not because the only tool available was the same tool that had created the problem. By the 3rd century, the denarius contained barely 5% silver. The coin that had built the empire was now almost worthless. And here is where the spiral begins. Because a worthless currency doesn't just cause inflation, it destroys trust. And without trust, the entire Roman system begins to come apart at the seams. The 3rd century was unlike anything Rome had experienced before. In the space of 50 years, there were more than 50 emperors. Most of them seized power through military force. Most of them were dead within months. The army, the institution that had made Rome great, had become the most dangerous force in the empire, installing and removing rulers at will. While generals fought each other for the throne, the frontiers bled. The Germanic tribes pressing against the Rhine and Danube were not the disorganized raiders of earlier centuries. They had been watching Rome for generations. They had learned from Roman tactics, adopted Roman weapons, and in some cases served in Roman armies. They were not barbarians in any meaningful sense. They were competitors, and they were waiting for Rome to look away. The plague made everything worse. A devastating epidemic swept through the empire beginning in the middle of the 3rd century and lasting for decades. Cities that had been engines of commerce and culture became places of fear. Trade routes that had connected the empire contracted. The population fell. Tax revenue fell with it. And a government that was already struggling to pay its soldiers now had even less to work with. The Emperor Diocletian understood that the empire was too large to govern from a single center. His solution was radical. He divided it. Not permanently. He saw it as an administrative reform, not a partition. But the division he created would eventually become permanent, and the two halves of the empire would follow very different paths toward very different fates. The eastern half centered on Constantinople, the new city that Constantine built on the Bosphorus, was richer, more urbanized, more connected to the trade routes of Asia. It would survive for another 1,000 years as the Byzantine Empire. The western half was different, less wealthy, less urbanized, more dependent on an agricultural economy that was increasingly disrupted by raids, by plague, by the movement of peoples across the frontiers. The Western Empire began to hollow out from within. And then came the Huns. They arrived from the steppes of Central Asia with a speed and ferocity that the settled peoples of Europe had never encountered. Their horsemen could cover distances that Roman cavalry could not match. Their tactics were fluid and unpredictable. They did not want to conquer and administer territory. They wanted to raid, to extract, to move on. The Huns did not destroy Rome, but they set in motion a chain of events that would. Because the peoples who lived between the Huns and the Roman frontier, the Goths, the Vandals, the Burgundians, had a choice: stay and be destroyed by the Huns, or move west into Roman territory. They moved west. The empire had absorbed migrants before. It had settled Germanic tribes inside its borders, used them as soldiers, given their leaders Roman titles. But the scale of what was happening now was different. Entire peoples were moving, not raiders, not soldiers for hire, families, communities, nations on the march. The Roman response was a disaster of management. Officials who were supposed to help the Goths settle inside the frontier instead exploited them, cheated them, let them starve. The Goths did what hungry, armed, desperate people do. They rebelled. At the Battle of Adrianople, a Roman army faced a Gothic force and was annihilated. The emperor himself was killed. It was the worst military defeat Rome had suffered in centuries. And unlike the defeats of earlier eras, there was no recovery, no new legions raised, no strategic genius to reverse the situation. The Western Empire simply absorbed the loss and continued to weaken. What followed was not a single dramatic fall. It was a long, slow unraveling. Generals who were themselves of Germanic origin commanded armies that were increasingly Germanic in composition. Emperors reigned for months before being replaced. The city of Rome was sacked, first by the Visigoths, then by the Vandals, events that shocked the Roman world not because of the physical destruction, but because of what they meant. The eternal city was not eternal. In the final decades of the Western Empire, the reality was that real power had passed to military strongmen, men like Aetius and Ricimer, who kept weak emperors on the throne as convenient fictions while they managed, or failed to manage, the actual business of holding the empire together. The last Western emperor, a boy named Romulus Augustulus, was deposed by a Germanic chieftain named Odoacer in the year 476. Odoacer did not declare himself emperor. He simply sent the imperial regalia to Constantinople and informed the Eastern Court that the Western Empire no longer needed a separate ruler. No one marched to restore him. No one raised an army in his name. The empire ended not with a battle, but with a bureaucratic letter. What does this mean for us? What does the fall of Rome tell us that we should actually pay attention to? It tells us that complexity has a cost, that systems, which become too large to understand, also become too large to fix. That the same institutions which create stability can calcify into the structures that prevent adaptation. That currency, trust made physical, is more fragile than it appears. That when the people inside a system stop believing in it, the system has already begun to fall, even if the buildings are still standing. Rome did not fall because its enemies were stronger. In almost every direct confrontation over 4 centuries of slow decline, Roman forces were still capable of winning battles. Rome fell because the will to sustain it, the shared belief that the sacrifice was worth it, that the system deserved loyalty, that tomorrow would be better than today, had quietly dissolved. The buildings lasted longer than the belief. They always do.